Do you ever think to yourself, if we could just have a more consistent flow of good sales opportunities into our pipeline, we'd be so much better off? Chances are you've thought of that for either yourself or for your team. My name is Mark Washek, and I'm the founder of PipeRev, and we are a pipeline generation agency that actually helps clients blast through sales goals by generating a steady stream of new sales opportunities. Now, we actually do this for organizations, but in this video, I want to walk you through the actual process of how we help clients generate more pipeline than they've ever had before. And you can model these exact same steps for your own organization. So let me walk you through exactly what they look like right here on the whiteboard. So step number one is we need to first understand the math of exactly what we need to accomplish. So it all starts with the math. So you want to first think about, well, what's the actual sales goal, right? So you need to have an actual dollar goal. And then from the sales goal, now we start to work down. We work downwards to understand, okay, how many sales per month does that require? So we know how many actual sales. Then we need to understand how many leads per month are going to be required in order to actually hit that number of sales. And so that's where this all starts, is leads or opportunities. Okay? Understanding that math, though, is so key. And you may be saying, Mark, this is really elementary. But so many organizations don't really understand exactly how many leads or even appointments they need to have in order to ultimately hit this. So that's step number one, is understanding the math. Number two is we need to now target our ideal prospect. And so what we need to understand here is, who exactly do we want to be actually talking to? Who do we want to be having those conversations with, and who do we ultimately, of course, want as our clients? Now, the other way of looking at this, which I find often just as effective, if not more effective, is knowing actually your ideal prospects. We call it your nemesis. So who is that prospect that it can be tempting to go after, but in reality, it's not really the person you want to be doing business with? This could be an actual person. It could be a type of a company. It could be a particular location. Getting very clear on who you don't want to do business with is going to be really, really important. So some of the questions you want to ask are, who's this person that we want to be going after or not going after? What do they do? What's their title? Where are they? Other key factors like industries, verticals, company size, revenues, whatever it is, but getting very, very clear in getting down to this ideal prospect, so that way at the end of the day, you have a pretty small pool of people that are ultimately going to be your ideal person. This is so key, really getting to that ideal person. And that's exactly what we're doing, is really narrowing down on exactly who we want to be going after, so there's no wasted energy. Okay, now we think about step number three, which is all of the ways that we can actually personalize our outreach at scale. So what we call this is personalize at scale. And so this is where we're going to actually start to be really thinking about, how can we have personalized messages, which typically come through the form of a cold email or possibly a phone call, maybe some kind of targeted outreach on LinkedIn, whatever it is. But how do we make sure that we're actually personalizing that outreach, but in a way that's efficient and doesn't require someone to do 30 minutes of research every time they're making one outreach? So what we want to avoid on the one hand is we never want to be just sending out, for example, that blast email, okay? Blast emails are really, really bad, right? And then on the other hand, we want the types of responses that we're getting for our clients are typically things like, wow, you really did your homework. You really understood our business and what we're looking for. So getting to that real deep level of personalization and really thinking, what are those types of areas that we can really personalize? It could be, specific, it could actually be personal details, right? But it could also be, business events, key occurrences, things that have taken place, new rounds of funding, whatever it is though that's showing that you're really understanding them. And so that way they don't think to themselves when they're receiving an email from you, or in this case from us, they're not saying to themselves, okay, this is clearly part of one huge blast out to a lot of people. And at our organization, this is really a two-tiered approach. One is that it requires both using tools like artificial intelligence and different algorithms, and then of course list building services. But on the other hand, it just requires some good old-fashioned human research. So it's really, really important. And so that's what actually leads us into point number 4 now, which I think we can see this, is actually mining the data. And so I gave you a little bit of a hint here about what this looks like already, but this is really where any campaign is going to succeed or fail, is the quality of the data. And so if you just go to a company and buy a list, for example, you can't just take that data and plop it right into emails because it's going to be really clunky. You're going to be referencing their company name and it's going to be ABC Company Inc., right? Apple Computers is actually Apple Inc., right? But you wouldn't refer, if you were sending an email to Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, you wouldn't be saying, Tim Cook with Apple Inc., you would just use Apple. And this is where it requires a high degree of really good data quality. And this is where we're really getting into a suite of using different tools out there that you have at your arsenal. And then, of course, is just good old-fashioned human research to really clean that data, that personalized data, to make sure that when someone is receiving an email from you or your organization, that they're saying to themselves, wow, this is really a thoughtful, personalized email, when in fact, what it really is basically a templatized outreach that is using really, really high degrees of personalization. And I mean, that's really where you start to get into some powerful stuff. And that's actually what leads us into this next step, which is actually, we'll move over here, which is laying out the prospecting campaign. So a prospecting campaign, again, this is where we're starting to get into having a truly consistent prospecting approach. And one of the things that we need to do is understand all of the steps up front. The problem with a lot of individual salespeople doing prospecting outreach is that it tends to be pretty inconsistent. And so what we've discovered as an agency is that by using a suite of tools and a really thorough prospecting campaign approach up front, understanding every single step that's going to happen in this whole process, we now understand exactly what that whole process is going to look like. And what we're doing is we want to be providing value on each and every touch. And so that's a really key idea, is that every touch, whether it's a LinkedIn outreach, a connection request, or some kind of a message, or some kind of a warming up using LinkedIn advertising, that there's value. So there's actually giving them something. The prospect is saying to themselves, wow, okay, these guys are experts. They've provided me some value. Of course, if it's an email, if we're sending out a series of emails to prospects, it's not just what we call the old bump email, where it's just if they didn't respond to the first one, just following up on the second one, right? Every single touch that we're doing, we are going to be creating value. So think about, what can you or your organization really be offering of value every time that you're making that outreach and putting it within an entire prospecting campaign? Okay, and now that leads us to the next piece. I'm going to scroll across this lit area here, and now is where we get into actually the meat and potatoes, which is to implement. And implementation is obviously everything, right? I mean, this is what organizations pay us to do, is actually to implement the whole process. But having said that, you can do this on your own. If you're an individual salesperson or you are a founder of a startup and you're saying, look, we don't have a lot of resources, you can actually be implementing these campaigns yourself. It just takes a lot of effort, and there's going to be some trial and effort along the way. But we want to use every single tool that's available to us. So in terms of how our email automation is actually going out, how we are connecting with people on LinkedIn, having a process so that way it doesn't require that every single step is relying on you to do it. Now, there are a million different tools out there. There are a million different tools for doing the research. There are a lot of tools for actually implementing the campaign. One of the things, though, that's really key is understanding technical issues like deliverability of emails. This sounds really silly, but we find that a lot of our clients in the past who have tried this and then come to us, one of the biggest challenges they just have is something as simple as getting the email into a prospect's inbox, because they're doing some things that are causing Google or Outlook algorithms to say, this isn't really a good email. And so it's not actually getting to the inbox. And so we need to make sure that you are testing your emails, making sure that they're not being perceived as spam and all of that. And then, of course, in the whole implementation process is knowing what that whole follow-up cadence looks like. For us, we like to see a cadence of about 5 to 6 emails going out to warmed up prospects who have been warmed up through LinkedIn advertising, because we're typically in the B2B space. And then we're sending out those 5 to 6 emails where there's value on every single touch, and highly, highly personalized emails going out every single time, and knowing what that follow-up actually looks like. And so, by the way, you can also be mixing them with your follow-up things like phone calls to prospects that have opened the emails a certain number of times. So we can use things actually like lead scoring to really determine, is this prospect, they've opened this email now 3 times, they're probably kind of interested in what we're doing because they keep looking at it, but they haven't replied. Well, we can know that, and then that can be followed up with by a salesperson or an SDR. That's really what the implementation piece is all about. And then lastly here, because I'm kind of out of room, but this is pretty easy, which is just test and repeat. Test and repeat. And this is really so big. And this is where a lot of organizations miss the boat on consistently effective prospecting campaigns, is we want to split test every single thing that we're sending out. So on any campaign that we're doing, whether, by the way, it's using advertising or cold email, we are testing every email with different variations and determining what works. And so we actually are letting the data decide which is more effective as opposed to what we're doing. So we obviously have some hypotheses about what's going to be the most effective subject line for an email, or the most effective call to action, or the most effective sales asset that we're going to be giving away to a prospect, or in an ad copy. We're obviously testing and we're making bets internally on what's going to work, but ultimately we are going to be split testing everything. There we go. We want to make sure that the data is making the decision. And once that data has made the decision, now we start to refine, and then we keep testing forever. We never get complacent because this is so big. So big, we've got to always keep testing and making sure that what we're doing is continually working, because what's working today may not work tomorrow. So those are the strategies for building this whole process, and I know I've laid out a lot here. But if you are a sales leader or a company founder, and this is a process that you think you might actually want us to help you set up, we'd love to actually send you some free leads to show you exactly how we think and work. So think of it as a way to just test drive us and a way to really kick the tires. Plus, you get some free leads for your salespeople to go make calls on. So actually just click the link below to fill out the ideal prospect profile form, and our team will get working. Again, if you are a sales leader or a company founder, just click that link that should be below this video in the details and fill out that ideal prospect profile form, and our team will get working on putting together some leads. And then of course we can set up a call to talk about more about how we would actually implement this whole process with your team.